Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome and welcome back to some of you, I hope, to our virtual workshop strategies for working with students and toddlers with vision impairments and or multiple disabilities, including deaf blindness, part 2. Our presenter today is Alea Landavillard. Alea, I'm going to let you introduce yourself again and get going.
My name is Olaya Landavillard, and so most people just call me Ola or Olaya, so whatever you guys feel comfortable calling me. And I'll give you a little bit of background about myself if this is the first time you're meeting me. I am the director of the American Printing House for the Blind Career, not only Career Connect, but Connect Center, which consists of 3 websites that were formerly part of the American Foundation for the Blind, which is Family Connect, Career Connect, and Vision Aware. And you can check out those websites by going to aphconnectcenter.org. There's also an information and referral line as part of the Connect Center. And that is an actual phone number that individuals can call if they have any questions or need some guidance to find services in their area. And that information is also on the website. And I mean, I can give that phone number to you. I have it written down here. I don't call it myself because this is not memorized. It's 1-800-232 5463. And so with the way I ended up at APH, with my background, I am a TBI and a bilingual educational diagnostician, which is along the lines of a school psychologist, which means that I can do educational assessments, including intellectual or IQ assessments. To identify, not diagnose, but identify any learning eligibility categories for special education, which would include learning disabilities, but also is part of the assessment process for students who are blind, visually impaired, multiply disabled, or deafblind. And so because our kids are so unique, and especially our kiddos with multiple disabilities, the term multidisciplinary means a whole lot for those kids, because when we're doing assessments, we have to have everybody involved in this. It can't just be the educational diagnostician or the school psychologist, which that's the other thing I wanted to add. So school psychologists can do the assessments for emotional disturbance and autism. And so because an educational diagnostician cannot, I would have to pair with a school psychologist to work with them if we had a student who was suspected of having autism or some kind of emotional disturbance disability. And that is extremely important for you as a TBI to understand why you really need to work with the school psychologist when it comes to working or assessing our kids who are visually impaired, who also have multiple disabilities, and or who are deafblind, because our kids sometimes are mistaken for having autism because of some of the behaviors that they possess or that they display, I should say. And so looking at active learning and looking at the resources that were provided to you in an email from Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. And there's also a Google Drive folder. There's a link to it that will always be on, where you can go back and access these documents just in case you lose them or you can't find them on your computer. You go to the Google Drive. It's been shared with you, so you should be able to access it. And today, while we're meeting, like Lisa said, the first part of this was going through what active learning is, what are the phases, what does that look like, and then how we look at using, how do you plan for active learning? So there's like an organizational way to do that by using a planning matrix to go along with what you're trying to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of that information, right, or like as quickly as I can, so then I can allow people who were able to find a student and do some of the homework, or do the homework that we assigned at the last meeting that we had, part one. And that way that person can share what they were able to do. So in the chat, if anybody was able to do the homework, which was completing a matrix, just can you put it in the chat? That way I know how many people were able to do some of that or all of it. I'm looking at the chat box to see if anybody. Okay.
Better
Did
question.
anybody?
I was going to say, a better question. Did anyone here attend part one?
I'm just about to ask that. Did anybody? Is anybody on this call who wasn't here for part one? So we see Rhonda wasn't here for part one.
And Leona was not.
Okay. Susie was here. Okay. Michelle missed. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm trying to see anybody else. Okay. So we have some who were here, some who were not. And so like Susie, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Were you able to do any of the homework? Just so I have an idea whether or not we can, as a group, then try to complete one from an example online. We're not in class anymore, so I won't. Okay. Oh, the population isn't what you, okay, that makes sense. Okay. All right. And also, it could have been a little difficult because of COVID restrictions. I don't know how many of you are able to actually be with the kids right now in schools. The good part is, because these kiddos are require a lot of observation in order to be able to develop a plan to work with them. You can use video to observe them, and that video can be taken by the service providers in the school. So always keep that in mind. In some ways, these kids are a little bit easier to assess if somebody is making a recording. So like in this case, if it's during COVID, they're home. And so the parent can actually be recording the student performing or not, or, you know, demonstrating whether or not they can perform a certain skill that you're looking for, like maybe self-feeding, or, you know, showing cause and effect. Like there's different things that you can do. So in some ways, these kiddos may be a little bit easier in that aspect, because you can, most of what you're doing with them is observing. Okay. So what I'm going to do then, because most people weren't able to actually do the homework or weren't here, I'll go through the PowerPoint. And then I'm gonna also kind of talk about, there is an assessment that can help you develop IEPs or IFSPs for these kiddos who are so unique that it's really hard to really dig down and find those details of what they can do. It's a lot more obvious regarding what they can't do. And so we as teachers, I always say this, and my students who are on this call know this, like it's like our job we're like detectives, right? Like it's our job to really investigate and dig in to see what the students can do. I feel like that's our job as TVIs, to prove doctors wrong. Not that doctors are bad or anything like that, but remember, they're medical, right? They're looking at all the medical issues that have caused either the visual impairment or the multiple disabilities or the deaf blindness. And when you look at the medical piece, sometimes it looks hopeless. And a lot of times, and I'm sure you have parents who have been told this, that their babies are never gonna do anything. Like they're always gonna be this way. You're always gonna have to help them. They're always going to live with you. They're never going to be able to work. They're never going to graduate school, you know. And I know as an early interventionist as well, I've heard that from parents all the time. And so by looking at the child, the whole child, and really digging in and creating these goals and plans for them using active learning, because active learning in and of itself requires the child to be active in their learning, right? Just like a child without disabilities, they're very active in their learning. You know, we roll a ball, they crawl after it to go and get it, because a child with no disabilities. So they're learning that if I want something, I have to move to get it. So then my motor, my gross and fine motor have to kind of get kicked into gear and then start working to move to go and get the ball. Our kids, we have to make that happen for them, because otherwise they're just going to sit there. And so that's what active learning is that's a big part of it, is we want them to be active and be a big part of what they are learning. So we are not learning to the students. The students are learning on their own, but we're there more like as a support for them, to provide those opportunities and let them interact and let them start the interaction. Not for us to, you know, say, hey, grab this or touch that. Like, we want them to want to do that, to be motivated to do that, just like other children without disabilities. So anyway, I'll get off my little soapbox there, and I'll go through what is active learning for most of us who were not here for part one. It's providing developmentally appropriate activities for children so that they can learn new skills. Okay. Especially for children with special needs, it's about providing an environment so that they can be an active participant. So the one thing I really like about active learning is that you can have a child or a student who is, let's say, 12 years old, but they're functioning developmentally between this birth to about 48 months range, which is where active learning takes place. So when you have a student who is 12 years old, you have to, and you're trying to provide developmentally appropriate activities for that child, right? Sometimes the activities that are chosen for a child who is 12 but functioning as a, you know, baby to maybe, you know, 4 or 5 years old, or not even 5, 4 years old, the toys and the activities that we use can make, in some ways they're like disrespectful, like we're giving them a baby toy because that's where they're developmentally functioning. But we have to remember, this is a 12-year-old child, or sometimes a 17-year-old child. I've had that before. And I don't want to give them one of those pop-up toys that has like Goofy and Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse when they hit the button and it pops up. Like, I don't want to do that's inappropriate. It's demeaning. And we have to be cognizant of that. Whereas active learning, it allows you to think outside the box and you can teach cause and effect without using a baby toy to a 17-year-old child or young adult at 17 years old, right? Even though they're functioning at a very low developmental age. That doesn't mean that they can't do anything. It just means that we have to meet them where they are. We can't ask them to do algebra if they don't even know how to count, you know, one-to-one correspondence, right? So it has to be developmentally appropriate, but we also have to keep in mind that it needs to be respectful to their actual chronological age, okay? So for those of you who don't know, active learning was developed by Dr. Lily Nielsen. And there is a whole website website devoted to active learning, and that's one of the I believe that's one of the documents. I can't remember if it's on the documents, separate documents like for resources, or if it's part of the PowerPoint that you have as well. But there's a link there's a link to the active learning website, and I'll show you that in just a minute too as we move along. And that talks about Dr. Lily Nielsen and basically why she developed this. She was an educational psychologist, but she was a part of a family who had 4 children who were blind. So she grew up with this, you know, the experience of having siblings who are blind. And so there's this, you know, natural, you know, inclination for her to want to work with her brothers and sisters. And that just turned into a whole career for her. And so she developed this total approach for promoting that development of individuals who have severe and multiple disabilities. Oops, sorry. So again, I'm going back to the developmental age of up to 4 years is kind of the focus for active learning. But it can also help those who are older than that developmental level. Just depends on what their skills are, where they are in their skill development. Because remember, a lot of our kiddos have splinter skills. So some of them may show skills that are above 48 months in some areas, but not consistently in a certain, 6-month range of skills that a child or a student should be displaying. Because that's how the assessment is broken up when you're, and like I said, we'll get through that as we go further. But assessment is what drives IEP planning and programming and placement, right? So we're talking about the active learning approach, but then how do you develop the plans and the IEPs and all that stuff for a child or a student who is functioning at this developmental level? And so we're looking at those learners who are at that developmental level of, of birth to 48 months. So you've also got, it's also good for infants and toddlers, which this is a part of what we're doing for this webinar series. It's not only school age, but we're also focusing on the IFSP part. And so it targets those kids. It also targets older learners with significant multiple disabilities, those with sensory impairments, obviously for vision or hearing loss or deaf blindness, and those kiddos with autism. And I really like that this approach is good for kids with autism because, like I said, especially with our kids tend to be kind of lumped in to this, this possibility that they have autism. Like it's something that people are keeping an eye on. And because you can use this approach with those kids, in some ways, you're able to even separate out the blindisms from the autism, if that makes sense. Okay. And so there are 5 characteristics of this active learning. So the active participation, which is important because we're a lot of times as teachers, we're so used to doing the direct instruction that, we forget to have our students actually be active in that instruction. And so, and here they're not only active in the instruction itself, but they are actually active in that participation of the instruction. Repetition. So we know the more you do it, the better you get, right? And so that's another big characteristic. And of course, developmentally appropriate activities, reinforcement, and limiting distractions. And as TVIs, I think we've all learned about CBI, and with kids who have multiple disabilities, in some ways, they may demonstrate or display some of those similar characteristics that are associated with CBI, in the sense that they can only process one sense at a time. And so if you're working with a child trying to implement active learning in a classroom, and there's people coming in and out of the classroom, which happens, right, in a regular normal school day. At school, you've got, people coming in and out, especially if you have a self-contained classroom that has multiple children in there with multiple disabilities. You've got therapists coming in at different times, so you have to be real cognizant of all of the distractions that can actually interfere with the student processing what it is that you are trying to have them participate in and demonstrate their ability to do whatever skill it is you're working with them on. So that is extremely important. And I think as TVIs, I think we hear that a lot, and it should be just a natural part of our daily practice, and making sure that we're trying to limit distractions as much as possible. So in addition to the characteristics, there are actually 5 phases of educational treatment. And I worry a lot about sometimes the words that are used when we are working with, or trying to implement a certain strategy or use a certain assessment tool. Because when I hear treatment, I think of like therapy, or I think of medical treatment. We are not medical personnel. We're not therapists, right? We are teachers. So when I hear treatment, that I think requires us to be able to explain what our role is, so that we don't get lumped into anything that looks like therapy, if that makes sense. Okay. And the reason I'm saying that is because, as being part of the CVI world, like we all are as TVIs, I think sometimes the line gets blurred, and we're kind of expected to be therapists, but that's not what we're trained to do. We're trained for access, right? And making things accessible for the kids. So just when you use the terms 5 phases of educational treatment, keep that in mind, just to be able to kind of break that down and explain. Even though it says treatment, that doesn't mean that we're therapists or medical doctors. That's just the term that they gave us, that Dr. Nielsen gave to this method. So this treatment, and I'll just read it, provides teachers, professionals, and parents with the techniques necessary to treat emotional and social level of a learner, as well as academic, cognitive, or physical ability level. So the first level would be offering. Phase 2 would be imitation. Phase 4, sharing the work. And then phase 5, consequence. So in phase 1, you're gonna, when you're offering, you promote that trust between the learner and the adult. You observe the learner's reactions to you and what you are offering. Identify what the learner likes or dislikes. Establish an understanding of the learner's emotional level, and then you introduce a self activity. Sorry, I didn't know what that noise was. It was my dog. She's coming downstairs. Hopefully she won't start barking. That usually happens. The joys of working from home. And then phase 2, which would be the imitation, right? That would increase the learner's interest in activities nearby. Increase the learner's ability to initiate their own activity, because if they are imitating something that you're doing and they like it, like let's say banging a drum, then you may not even have to do it anymore, and they start initiating banging the drum. Okay. And I'll show a couple of video clips as well, just so you get an idea of what these phases are and what they kind of look like. And also increase the learner's belief in him or herself. And it's with these kiddos, it's hard for us to measure their belief, like they believe in themselves, because they can't tell us in those words. So we have to be good detectives and use what we're finding in our observations to be able to say, you know what, he or she, I can see they are demonstrating that they believe in themselves, because they're taking the chance to do the activity, or to, to go outside of their comfort zone, to perform a certain activity or skill. So that's what I'm saying. When you're doing active learning and you're trying to see whether or not what you're doing with the student is helping them develop and progress, because we have progress monitoring, so we have to be very cognizant of what we're doing, and we have to be good about documenting these particular phases and looking at imitation. What am I doing, and then what is their reaction, and how, by their nonverbal communication, are they showing us that they feel like they can do this. And then that means if they feel comfortable doing something, then they're ready to move on to the next level. Okay. So like I said, for us, we're like detectives with these kids. That's why it's never a boring day when you have these kinds of kids on your, it's never a boring day anyway, when you're a TVI, but when you have these, these kiddos on your caseload, I mean, each one is so different. It's just like a different case altogether, each and every time. Which that's what in some ways I miss when I not being out there as much to be able to work with these kids. And then of course, imitation is you want to introduce activities and movements that they haven't performed yet, because you want to pique their curiosity so that they're kind of studying what you're doing, and you kind of see those, the wheels kind of turning, and then they trying to figure out how to do it themselves. And that is where that active participation, that active learning comes in, because you're not doing hand under hand to show them how to do something. They are imitating you as much as possible. I know, because if a child is completely blind, obviously we have to get creative, and we would have to use some hand under hand. But if you're close enough and the child has enough vision, you'll be able to do these things, and they can imitate you. And you'll see that in some of the videos some of the video clips, because there's so many videos that we could spend an entire week going through, like a phase a day, just going through all the example videos and things like that. So I just want to show you like these short clips to give you an idea. Oops, sorry. Interaction. That helps a child learn dependency on another or several other people, helps them initiate their own interactions, enhances their development of self-identity, and it gives a child the basis for social development. So we want the child to be able to initiate their own interactions, not by banging their head, which I'm sure you've worked with kids who, or have heard of children who do that. They bang their head in order to initiate an interaction with an adult who nearby, who can give them whatever it is that they want. Are they hungry? Do they just want attention, right? And that can go back to their developmental level. Remember, we're dealing with children or students who are birth to 48 months, so birth to like 4 years old. But at the same time, that doesn't, we want to help the student develop a more appropriate, developmentally appropriate interaction, and to initiate interaction. So that's also part of that phase 3, trying to teach them how to do this. How do I initiate interaction with those around me? And of course, to give the child a basis for social development. Social development is extremely important. It's something that we all need, and our kids are no different. And I know that working with families like I have for so many years, that is one of the fears that I've heard, I think, the most from families, is that, I don't want my child to just be put in a corner in the classroom and not interacted with. Because we've seen that, we know it happens. And when I've seen that, I've reported it, and I mean, when I was in Houston, that's where I'm from. That's where most of my career was. I made some waves doing that. um, but because it's for the child. The child never going to increase their skills if they're just left to the side and they're not developing socially, they're not developing physically, they're not developing those skills that we all need our learners to develop. And then sharing the work, increasing their experience of success, and involving them in new social relationships, and increasing their interest in acquiring new abilities. So that's a big part of what we're doing here. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. And then phase 5, consequence. Help the learner to endure meeting demands, help them endure changes in life, which we know kids who are at that developmental level, they like routine. Changes can be very stressful. Sometimes changes set them back, like it makes them regress a little bit. So that's something that part of the phase is that we want to make sure that they can adjust to changes. And in a school setting, changes happen a lot. You've got a fire drill, you've got assemblies, those kinds of things can mess up that routine, and those changes can be difficult. And that's where, if you have a student who has autism, that's why this is also a really good method or approach to teaching these kids. It also helps this learner feel self-confident, which is definitely fundamental in making your own decisions about your life, and establishes that sense of responsibility. Okay. And so here, we talked a lot about the activity and goal matrix, and how that matrix can actually help you evaluate whether your planned activities provide a focus on the IEP goals, the student's IEP goals, and ensure that there are ample opportunities in all activities to work on these goals. So we want to be sure that the IEPs, not only for one particular subject area, and that's the only time that you are engaging in active learning for a particular skill. And then let's say the OT comes in and they're doing a totally separate activity, or working on a totally separate skill set. And so in some way, sometimes we're undoing what the other person is doing to help the child progress. So we want to use this activity and goal matrix to help the entire team focus on a particular goal, and any activity that they are implementing for their IEP goal is always working towards the common goal that is on that matrix. Okay, the goals and objectives that we put into our students' IEPs. Okay, so what is the goal? Well, the goal is something that we want our kids you have pics of some toys. Okay, yeah, that would be great. Well, I think we'll have a break in the presentation, and I would love to see some of the toys that some of the individuals put together. Okay, so our goal is obviously, that's what we're looking at for the entire year, right? And then our benchmarks is just how we're going to get our kids to meet that goal. Okay, that's how that works. Of course, that's how we can monitor how they're progressing. And then here, talking about, you might have a child working on reaching and grasping using a little room. But it doesn't mean that the child might not also learn how to use his or her vision or hearing. You see how the vision and hearing goals, or IEP, right, benchmarks, also can go into or work alongside of gross and fine motor development. Okay, so that's just something that we should all be doing for all of our kids, so that we're not undoing what each other is working on with the student. Otherwise, our kids will never progress, and our progress monitoring won't really show what we're doing with the student. So what does this look like when we're doing active learning? Okay. It should be positive and describe a skill that can be seen and measured. So it answers the questions like who will achieve it, what, which is this, what skill or behavior, how, in what manner or at what level are they going to do this, where, in what setting or under what conditions, and when, by what time, what's an end date. Okay. Oops. Where's that? Okay. So I'm clicking on this link to look at some examples of active learning using the matrix. So when we're looking at developing the goals, remember we're looking at the questions who, what, how, where, when. So for example, using physical therapy as an example, who is going to be doing this would be the student. What skill or behavior are we working on in physical therapy? Will reach and grasp a variety of preferred objects using a palmar grasp without being prompted, which is important, without being prompted. Because remember, we're working at that behavior, we're in this particular skill, we're looking at the student to initiate. Remember, that's like part of the 5 phases of treatment. How, right, or what manner or level, so measurable, at least 10 times during a 15-minute observation period through weekly observations conducted by staff. Where are we going to do this? In a little room, on a position board or a resonance board, or during independent play, during a adult-child interaction, using the techniques of offering and imitation. Okay. And then when? By the end of the school year is when we're looking at this child reaching the physical therapy goals of reaching without being prompted, reaching and grasping without being prompted. Okay. And then here they break down math, literacy. Okay. And I don't want to go through each one because I want to keep moving forward so we can get to some of the examples. And I want us to see some of the examples that that one of our participants have. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Oh, this is also on, because it's on the PowerPoint that you have. The link here will bring you the parentcenterhub.org and has benchmark. It helps for you to explain to parents what these words mean so that they can then advocate for their child. So I really like this website because it does provide a lot of information as well on how you can teach or support the parents in learning how to advocate for their child. I mean, we wear so many hats as a TVI, and one of those hats is really trying to help the parent learn the ins and outs of special education and the terminology, and of course what their rights are. And if we want them to be able to advocate for their child, they need to know what they don't know. I think we've all been in that position where we don't know what we don't know, so we don't know what questions to ask, right? And our parents are no different. And if anything, this is even more overwhelming than anything that they've gone through beyond, having to deal with the medical realm, dealing with special ed. I mean, that is just a totally different monster for them to have to try to tackle. So this is also a really good resource for you and to pass along to your families. So the sample annual goal of that I showed you right here for physical therapy. So this was the annual goal, right? So here we've got the benchmark or objective examples for that goal. So by October, during independent play in the little room or with a position board containing graspable objects, the student will reach and use a palmar grasp to attain objects at least 5 times during a weekly 15-minute observation. So you can see for each of the things that are listed on the goals, they have particular benchmarks or objective examples listed there for you. And then here, what you have in the Dropbox, not Dropbox, Google Drive folder and what Lisa sent you, you have copies of these files in Word. I believe Word. I don't think I did. I downloaded them in PDF. Word just seems to be more accessible. And then of course there's a blank form for you to practice writing goals and objectives. So hopefully we'll get to do that together. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Oops. This is where we were. Okay. I'm gonna scroll down real quick for ideas of things you can make. So Lisa, you said that one of the participants has some examples or pics of toys that they're using with the student. So if you can give them access to share, I'd really like for people to see what
She sent
those
them to
are
me.
and how they're used. Oh, okay.
She sent them to me, but I don't know that they made these so much as they've chosen these to try out with this particular student.
Oh,
But
that's even, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Okay.
Hold on a second.
Is that person on?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
And
maybe they can talk a little bit about the pictures too.
And her last name's Welliver. I'm not sure if it's Sue or
Oh, Susie.
Susie, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on a second and let me share my screen. Hopefully this won't be weirded out. It will stop you, Alea.
Oh, okay, that's fine. You want me to stop sharing? Would that help?
I will. It will automatically.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. Hold that thought. All right. Now, what do you see? Do you see them?
Okay. Yes, I do. Okay.
And I have nothing to say about these. So if Susie would like to
that's why I was
in
like, if
and
Susie can,
talk.
yeah, I'd love for Susie to give us some background on this and what you did with them, who you used it with.
I unmuted mine, Alea.
Okay.
I have a student in a life skills early elementary class. Unfortunately, he's so heavily medicated that he sleeps 90-some% of his school day.
Yep.
And so it's been really challenging to get him engaged. Mom did share that, and for the most part, he doesn't participate in person, and he hasn't for 2 years because of all of his other health conditions. But Mom said that he likes dowel rods, something like a dowel rod. She said he will put that in his hand. Most anything else, no, he's not interested in reaching for it, touching it, or doing anything. So we were trying to think of something roundish, like a dowel rod. So the red one, when you hold it vertically, the lights will come on, and they're on in that picture. And if you let it, if you let your grass kind of like hang down, it'll shut off. So, and it also vibrates. So it gives him lights and vibration. That feedback. Yeah. So that's the red one. And then the yellow one is also kind of round. You know, he can't hold it in his hand necessarily. But we said we would try it. It has 3 functions. That is a mirror that it's reflecting off of while it's sitting on his tray. So you can, there are 3 tiny little buttons on the back, and Mom will have to do these, but you can make it vibrate, you can make it sing, and you can make it light up. And you have the option of mixing and matching all 3 of those functions however you want, or leave them all off, and he can just bat at the tube and make the beads go around.
Okay.
So it was just, Mom said she would be willing to try because she's not found really anything at home that interests him. And so I told her about these options, and she said she would like to try them.
Okay, so she hasn't tried them yet.
No.
Or she has?
Because we can't.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't been able to hook up, and Mom is really, doesn't really want us coming into the house. So we have to figure out how to keep leave them on the porch, you know, run and done kind of thing.
Yes, yes. Well, one of the things that just like popped into my, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I haven't heard back from her on how he's accepting any of these.
Okay. I'd be interested to see, how and whether or not this is would motivate him, right? And I think one of the things that kind of struck me when I'm looking at the toy on the right side of my screen, the yellow one with the mirrors and the tube that rolls or spins. You said there's like three little buttons that make it sing, vibrate. Is that what you said? And light
Yes,
up? Is that
vibrate,
what?
and you can make it light up.
Light up, sing, and vibrate. Okay. Where are the three buttons, like on the back? Are
They're
they
on the
somewhere
very
where the
bottom. You have to pick up the base and push
ah
these teeny
mhm.
little, he'll never be able to get to it. And in fact, the directions even suggest
Unless,
use a pen or pencil to get to these little on-off
oh
buttons.
my God, they're that small, huh?
They're tiny.
And you know what that just what I was thinking, because you know how there, and I can't now, of course the name escapes me. You have to forgive me for that. I am my brain is not working like it usually does. I was up really late last night, not partying. I wish I was. No, I had a friend of mine who passed away, my childhood friend. And so we just, it's been a hard last couple of days. So I apologize if I'm kind of spacey, but one of the things that I was just thinking about, and I know that Tristan Pierce, who does a lot of projects for students who are multiply disabled, there's it's like switches that you can attach to, maybe to those three little choices down there. And
Yeah, the yellow one does have a port so that we can attach a switch. We didn't
okay,
know it
so if
came with
you,
that port until we already got it. So now
oh
we have to
really,
ask for a
okay,
switch.
okay, so with the switch, then by um again, this would require that imitation, right, that we were talking about. One of the phases is um first so that we can figure out what the child likes and doesn't like, right? Because like the mom already knows he's just not motivated to do anything. But by having mom do some, like, use the switches to choose light or choose sound or choose vibration, and that like kind of a combination of the three,
Yeah.
and maybe one time just do light and don't, and then try two together, and then try maybe all three together. And as as the mom or dad or whoever the caregiver is doing this, and maybe having the child there to start to see or feel or hear, right? Depending on, I don't know all the disabilities a child has, what's going on. And then see and make sure the child knows that it's there, and see if what you were doing or what the mother was doing with him to kind of give him an indication that there's something here that he can interact with, and see how he interacts with it. See if it motivates him to use a switch, and which switch. And the thing is, like, when we're working with these kids, you were in you were in the part one, there's that video of the teacher that has the student on her, like, not on her lap, but like she's sitting behind the student and trying these different vibrating things, and one of them the student did not like whatsoever and just like threw a fit. Right, but the other ones the student liked and actually initiated some interaction with it. And so that's a good example to use when thinking about using this particular toy with switches. Obviously the wand doesn't need a switch because it's something that he would just hold in his hand, right? Because it's
Right.
that round, like a dowel rod.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, I don't know, he might like that one better, and it might be easier because there is no switches, right? That's something that can be laid on his lap or on his hand. And he then would interact with it because it's just there and he knows it's there. And that might be a good place to start, and then move on to the other I don't want to say toy, I want to say not even activity, object, let's say that. Because I don't know how old the student is. If the student's older, I don't want to say toy.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like we have to,
I think he's 8,
how old?
7 maybe. I
Okay,
can't
so then
remember. I
toy
think
would
he's
be
7.
appropriate. Okay. Okay. So then toy would be appropriate. It's just that, if they're older, I don't want to say toy. So it's like always trying to, again, be respectful of the student. But remember too, because we're working in close, conjunction with the families, hopefully we should be, how might they feel if their 12 or 13-year-old is playing with a toy, right?
Yeah.
Versus, I'm trying to think of like a more appropriate term to call it, beyond
Game.
object, right?
Another teacher calls them games.
I'm sorry?
I have another life skills teacher. When she presents things, she calls them games. She has the older
Oh, well, there
kids.
you go.
Calls them
Well, there
games.
you go. See, that's what I'm saying. Games. There you go. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Again, for the older kids. So, but I do like these examples, and I'm glad you found the port for that, because I think because it offers those choices. Again, those choices, that's a cause and effect too, right? That's a skill that we want our students to have and understand that when they do something, it does have an effect on something else. It makes something happen. Consequences.
Yeah. We
And
like that yellow
using
one because of those choices you talked about, because we thought then we could play around with the different options and find out, is it one of these things he likes? Is there a 2-piece combination he likes? Or does he like all 3? We felt like we could try more things out with this toy.
Oh yeah, you could. Yeah, because the other one is just the vibrating and the 2 lights, right? And of course it's reflective, right? It has the middle part it looks like it's reflective, like reflective
Yeah, it's
wrapping
kind of
paper,
like
but
sparkly
it's not.
tape.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, but it's not crinkly, like there's no sound to it, right?
No.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's a simple one. Again, that's something to, if he's not motivated by anything else, right? Or, wanting to do something that might spark that motivation, that interaction, right? Yeah, no, right. Yeah. Then that's all you can do. And that's the thing with active learning is you have to it's a trial and error most of the time until you find what works. Right. And that's why like using those standardized assessments with our kids don't work real well, because it doesn't allow us to do the trial and error as much. Our kids get punished for that. Whereas we're not trying to, but not punish like, they're in trouble physically, punished on the test. Like they're not given credit for the things that they can do, because we're not allowed to kind of think outside the box and take that opportunity to take those chances. Right. So I think you have a good, some good games lined up and a good plan to see if not only the one simple game will increase interaction and increase motivation, but then move over into, if that's increased interaction and motivation, move over into choice making and cause and effect. And again, it can take a year for our students to actually make that move from that one skill to the next. But that's okay, as long as we are seeing them move. There shouldn't be this, they're not doing it in 2 months, we need to move on. Well, that doesn't work good for our kids. So I do like your plan. I would be really interested to know how this goes. I think that would be really cool. And I would love to, I mean, if mom took video of him doing that, wouldn't that be so cool to be able to see that with your student?
Yeah,
because that just shows some progress. Like, oh my gosh, oh, nice. Oh, that would be awesome. I think that would be cool. And then maybe if she allows to share it, that's something Lisa could probably share with the group, that has attended these 2, the part 1 and part 2, or just part 2, because I think that's also important for people to be able to see that, because it's possible. It can be done. So I love it. Thanks for sharing that. That is awesome. And just in case some of you're not aware of where like you can buy some of those materials, like what Susie just showed you, I'm sure, Susie, you probably checked that out from either your school district or so there's got to be some clearinghouse for your school district.
It's from Patton's Library. Patton's Lending Library here in Indianapolis.
Oh, There you go. And yeah, because typically states have some kind of AT lending library. They should anyway. And so that's something to think about for those of you who, aren't aware of those types of materials that can be available, where you don't have to actually learn how to make your own. But if you want to make your own, games or equipment or objects or toys, there are, I have some links here for resources where you can make your own equipment, or you can purchase equipment. So I'm going to click on this active learning space. This is the go-to website for active learning, and it's just activelearningspace.org. Okay.
You're not
and as you
showing
can
us
see, it was.
anything.
I'm sorry.
Alaya, you're not showing us
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me to share. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, so now can you guys see the screen? Yes?
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta find the chat box again. Okay, so this is the main, like, where you would go for active learning, activelearningspace.org, which is one word. And then you go from there. There's all these tabs here that'll take you to where you want to go to learn anything additional. And here, this particular one on equipment basically has information about how you can make an activity wall, how you can make books, elastic board, mobiles or mobiles, mounts for musical instruments, any pegboard books for children with CBI, a position board, a resonance board. And I'll click on that because that's something that people talk about a whole lot when you're dealing with active learning. And so if you're not, let me see what this, if you're not familiar with what a resonance board is, there's this video is only a minute. I'll show it really quickly. Let's see and how it's used with a student.
A title reads, Using a Resonance Board.
So did you notice really quickly that they're actually sitting on a resonance board? So that means that they're going to be getting feedback when anything moves. The teacher was just sitting there holding that pan with the ping pong balls. Wasn't not talking to him, not saying anything. He knows it's there because it's like right by his hand, and he initiated that interaction. So let's see what else. And she's not talking to him.
Cindy transfers the balls from the paddle drum to a metal bowl. Note that she changes just one element at a time as she makes the transition from one activity to the next. Jack reaches into the metal bowl and picks up another ball to bring to his mouth.
Oops. Oh, I'm blocking this, and I don't want to do that thing.
A title reads, Pin Richten Center for Blind
Okay.
Children.
So this it's not flat. It actually moves very, it's not like it moves like a waterbed, or if you're familiar with what a waterbed is, but it provides some feedback that sitting on a floor just without anything underneath that's loose, or that can provide some feedback to them to help the child recognize and feel that they are where they are in space, because that's also important, right? So there's a lot more videos here on doing independent play on a resonance board. And of course, if you want to make resonance board. There's directions here to do that. And so the good thing about, if you want to make some of these things is, if you go to like Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace Hardware, a lot of times they'll cut this to the size for you. So you can always just take this document in with you if you decide you want to make a resonance board, and that gives them the dimensions, and they'll help you. At least that's been my experience, and others who I know who are who do active learning often, that they found that once you go there, like Home Depot, Lowe's, and Ace, these places, they feel like they want to help you, because they know, like, they feel like they're helping you help another, child. So it's a neat feeling for everyone involved if you're going to be making something. I'm going to go back. Okay. And then lilyworks.org is another place where you can get information and more materials about active learning. She actually has a product catalog. And just so you know, she passed away in 2013, and that was on our slides, but she still has this foundation, and people still keep up with the active learning site and continue to move it forward. And so here there is the catalog that shows all the different types of equipment that is recommended for use if you're lucky enough and have the money to purchase them, your school district anyway. And if not, then you have these resources on how to make your own equipment. Okay. Let me see what this one was here. Okay, the resonance board is the same thing that was on the other website. Yeah, on here on the Active Learning Space website. Okay. Oops. And then, oh, it's 7 after 4. Okay, I want to, and the time just always goes so darn fast. So the resources for the presentation are here, so you can always go and take a look at that. One of the things I did want to, add to this presentation, and this came to me today, so I apologize, and I'm going to stick this in that Dropbox, in the Google Drive, so that you have access to it. So Lisa, don't kill me. But the way that you can develop the IPs and the goals and benchmarks, you can't, we don't just come up with that stuff, in thin air, right? We have to have something to guide us, right? And assessment drives placement and programming, and the IEPs. It drives everything. So there's actually a functional scheme assessment that goes along with active learning. So this is where you would start in order to then use these. Oh, good. You do have that. There you go, Lisa. Lisa just let everybody know that's it, that this book is in your lending library. That's excellent. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. It's an actual assessment and it can be overwhelming. I'll tell you right now, because, it doesn't look thick, but it's pretty thick. And it is really detailed, and it breaks down all like 20 different areas that you look at when you are trying to develop these IEPs, these IFSPs. Now, the thing about IFSP, remember, IFSPs are driven by the family, right? The thing is, and I swear I'm going to make a t-shirt that says this, because anybody who's on this call who knows me and who's ever been in my classes, this is one of my favorite things to say. But because it's true. You don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to ask for, right? You don't know what questions to ask. So when we're dealing with IFSPs, we're dealing with what the family is wanting us to help them work on with their child, right? But by having data and going through that data with the family, then they can then say, oh, you know what? I think I want my child to work on, this particular skill, whatever it is. So the functional scheme assessment is something that can help drive that IFSP, because it's giving the parents information. It's empowering them so that they understand where their child should be developmentally and what are the things that we need to be working on, or that they need to be working on to help their child get to those different developmental levels, okay, for where they are. So the functional scheme assessment, and again, this is a live link, and it goes to the section of the active learning space website, okay? So I just wanted to click on that just to show you that, what that was. And then this is also hyperlinked, okay, to, oh, see, I knew my dog was gonna bark eventually, sorry about that. I had that hyperlink because I want you guys to see how you can get some additional active learning training for free. On this particular website, the Active Learning Space website, again, under assessment, they actually have webinars that have been done. And, you can see here, it's all broken up into, chapters. And so I just wanted you to know how to get to this particular area of the website, because this is talking about functional schemes, the assessment itself. So it's training you on how to give the assessment, because the assessment, it's not as easy as like just checks and, checks and minuses. Like, you're actually having to observe and take notes and putting a date on when you're doing that, because this is a tool that can follow the student for years and years and years. You can also use it as a progress monitoring tool, which again, that's super important, especially with our kids, because I know myself in my own experience, I have been in IEP meetings where the progress monitoring was not as detailed and was not, like, for example, someone used an Oregon project, and an Oregon project for kids who are blind or visually impaired goes from birth to 7 years old. But even then, the skills that we're looking at in the Oregon are a lot higher than the kiddos who are candidates for this active learning method. And so we need to have assessments that actually go, that can give credit to those really hard to measure skills, if I'm saying that correctly, or trying to, because I don't want to say it's really low or these kids have low skill. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that we have to, again, we go back to this being a detective. We have to look for the minutia of what the child is doing, what they're communicating, and all of that comes down to observation and looking at those things that interest them and motivate them. And again, that trial and error, like I was just mentioning to Susie. So when you're looking at using this and how it follows the student for years, you can you can see the pattern of the child actually increasing. Where I've been in IEP meetings where they didn't do that, they used a tool that was not appropriate for the developmental level of the student, and it looked like the child wasn't progressing at all from year to year. And in that particular case, I mean, it actually went to due process, because the parent, which I can't blame the parent, they just felt like the student wasn't learning anything, wasn't progressing. I mean, the student was severely multiply impaired, but that doesn't mean that they don't have skills, and that doesn't mean that they can't progress. So using a tool like this can actually show those little areas that actually can show that the student is moving forward in skill development. It might be slower than what we'd want, but the bottom line is that the student is progressing in a way and in a timeline that's appropriate for that student and their abilities. Okay, so follows them for years. You just got to make sure you use a date. A lot of times I recommend using different colors for each year. Then using it as a progress monitoring tool, you get data from all different fields. Okay, you get a current level of performance where they're functioning. So like, present level of performance, does that sound familiar? Like, or PLAF, like what you would need for an IEP. It's also a graphic way to see what the child is doing, help figure out areas of developmental growth or stagnation, assist with a plot, assist with developmental goals and objectives. It helps establish that emotional age, establish sensory and motor skills, establishes likes and dislikes, which is important, right? Because that's one of the things Susie, I'm sorry, say it again. What happened? Okay, I thought somebody said something. And then it helps determine the overall functioning level to guide instruction and interaction, right? Now, you see there's these 20 fields of the functional scheme that's assessed here. Gross and fine motor, mouth development. So right here, you're going to need probably a speech therapist because, you're looking at mouth development. Visual perception, auditory perception, haptic tactile perception, spatial perception, object perception. You see how 20 skills. So it's getting down to like the smallest measurable skill that we can try to observe and see where the child is actually functioning. That's why this is a really good assessment to use with these particular kids, because then this directly transfers over into the active learning strategy. Okay. It also takes a look at these developmentally impending functions. So like tactile defensiveness, poking the eyes, wringing the hands or waving of the hands, biting. I've worked with kids that are like just constantly biting their hand. Oh my gosh, poor babies. I remember that. Grinding their teeth, or, just like having the spastic reactions to things. And some of those things are learned. Some of them are things that people haven't tried to, untrain, I guess, if you because it's one of the things that is getting in the way of the student actually moving forward. Because if, let's say, if they're poking their eyes, that's all they want to do is poke their eyes. They're never going to interact with anything else. So it helps us figure out why they're doing those things that they're doing, and then what are some of the things that we can do to move them away from those functions that are impeding their ability to develop further than where they are. So there's a section in that assessment that does that too. The challenge with the assessment, you can't do it all at once because you see, these 20 areas, I can't imagine you try to do it all in one sitting. It wouldn't be appropriate anyway, because this is going to take time over days, and you should not be the only one doing this. This should be truly a multidisciplinary activity for the student. So can't do it at once. The part of the team has to include the parents. Parents should always be included, especially when we're working with kids who are disinvolved, because there's lots of things that they can tell us that we may not witness in a school setting, because kids are different at home than they are at school. Of course, that you may not have all the equipment that's mentioned in the assessment. So again, that's where you would look at, can you check, if there's a place for you to check some of the stuff out, or do you need to make the equipment, or is there a way to substitute something out for the equipment that's mentioned in the assessment, so that the student can maybe demonstrate that skill, may not have to use that piece of equipment. So there's some flexibility there. And of course, some of the areas are not as rich as others. We can't have a perfect assessment, but with 20 areas, I think you're getting a really good in-depth picture of the child, where they're functioning, and how and when to start moving them forward. So just a real quick summary of the assessment. On page 7 of that book, there's a full review of the present level of development. And that's where you would put the dates of where that child, like if you're doing the assessment I don't know, you're doing the assessment twice a month for the school year, then you would be putting the days that you are in doing the assessment and where you are recognizing the particular skills that the student is demonstrating on those days. Okay. You will most likely see a discrepancy between fields, again, because we have splinter skills that our kids are, that, you know, our kids tend to have those splinter skills. So you might have a student who is performing a skill at the 48-month range, and then you've got a student, and that same student is not performing a skill at the 6-month range, you know, or at the 36-month range. And so you're like, how can they be performing this higher level skill and not be performing all the other skills in the 36-month range, right? But that's just the nature of our kiddos. And so you're going to see that, and that's okay. That's just part of the way it is with our kids. Development or lack of development in one field will definitely influence development in other fields, okay? Because a lot of the skills that we have and that we're trying to get our students to develop and keep up with the, you know, developmental levels and progress through that are dependent on, they're like scaffolds between each other. So yeah, if they're not developed in one area, in gross motor, they're probably not going to be developed in fine motor. That's just one example. Okay. And so that you're going to find that. And again, that's okay, because a lot of times one skill depends on another. And so just looking at another example for math word problems, if the child is having, and this is higher level than 48 months, but for, as an example, if the child's having trouble reading in, you know, in reading class, right, in English language arts, they're going to have trouble doing math word problems. So it's going to developmentally, if they're having trouble reading, it's going to have an effect in math because of the reading aspect of math, right? So it's the same thing with these kids, just at a different level when we're looking at gross and fine motor, you know, those areas that we typically look at for kids who have multiple disabilities. And of course, this program should provide enough and appropriate opportunities in those deficit fields. And again, that's where this assessment can help you figure out where those deficit fields are and which one of those fields scaffolds to the next field, so that we know how to order, especially if they're splintered skills, how do we order what we're working with, what we're working on to help scaffold that child to the next level. Okay. And of course, the program should provide opportunities to use skills that are already achieved, so that the child feels, you know, good. And of course, again, if they don't have a lot of speech, they may not be able to say it, but we would know that they have confidence. They feel good. They feel like they can do something, and they feel like they're not losing all the time, that they're not always wrong. And they're not always struggling. And so that in and of itself provides that motivation for self-determination to keep moving forward, to keep wanting to try. So that's what this functional scheme assessment can help us with, especially when we're looking at planning. They're using that matrix to plan activities and goals and objectives. There's a slide here about scoring instructions, but I won't go into that because that'll take a long time, but it's there for to give you an idea. But also these websites that let me go back to this, to the webinars here, they break down how to score. Yeah, see, terminology and scoring. So that's a 25-minute segment. That's how detailed they get with this particular functional scheme assessment. So we have about 6 minutes left. Sorry, Lisa, I always run out of time. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry. I know I went over time and not allowing enough time for questions, but we have a little bit of time.
They're very quiet.
I probably just overwhelmed the crap out of them with all this stuff. A lot of times that's what it is. It takes a little bit to like sink in and like figure out, oh my God, what is all this? Because it can look overwhelming, it really can. But once you do it and you see how it's done, even by looking at the webinars that are there, you feel a little more comfortable and trying this with your students, or a student, if you're lucky enough to have one of these these special learners. And the beauty of it is like you're not gonna mess it up. That's what I love about the functional scale. It's flexible, right? There's no right or wrong at all. It's just it's about doing the best you can, giving the student credit for what they are demonstrating to you, and because that matters. It all matters. Every little thing, especially with these kids, it matters. And our kids should get credit for that. And that is something that I think parents need to hear, is that their student, their baby, their child can do this. And because they can do this, that means that there's potential for them to continue to develop and gain skills, right? And to me, that's what's so most important about this particular assessment. And then by using the active learning, and then using the matrix to help you plan that. And that matrix also, you can use it to help you lesson plan. And so there's so many benefits to doing this. It looks overwhelming, but once you get into it and see all the pieces, to be able to do a lesson plan that you don't have to write every single week, all you have to do is make little adjustments. And that's cool. That saves so much time and stress from you, for what you have to do. And that's the beauty of doing this active learning strategy, is that you can take care of so many things that you normally do as a VI teacher. And it's all kind of done at one time. And all you have to do is make slight adjustments, because again, these kids, it takes a long time for them to progress. And so you're only going to have to be making adjustments on the plans that you're using, and make small adjustments and, at weeks at a time. And you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel every week for these kids, because it takes a long time, and that's okay. And as long as you're documenting that it's happening, with fidelity, that somebody's working on this consistently. Oh yeah.
You have a question?
Yep. Susie's asking about if this is good with middle school. Yes, this book is helpful with middle school and high schoolers. I think that it's even more important to use this book with middle schoolers and high schoolers, because if these kids have gone through school and made it to middle school and high school, and nobody has done this particular type of assessment with them, imagine what has been missed, right? And by doing this, you'll be able to show the skills that students has, and you may be able to really shock some people at the middle school and high school level. Like, yeah, this kid has had this skill all this time, and we're not taking advantage of that to help catapult them forward. And so, yeah, and that's the other thing, right? If you use something like the Oregon project on a middle schooler or high schooler, and a parent sees that you're using an assessment that is geared for preschoolers, that's gonna that's gonna cause some problems. It's lack of respect for the student and the family, and of course, it denies that student dignity. So the beauty of the functional scheme assessment is there's no particular, it doesn't say that it's geared on the cover for preschoolers. It's talking about developmental levels. Whereas some of the other assessments that may be along the developmental level of this particular assessment, because remember, it's looking for students who are functioning in the birth to 48-month level. Some of the other assessments that I would use all have either preschool in them or infants and toddlers in the title. And when you're using an assessment like that and you have to report it, again, it's going to deny that student dignity. Whereas this one just says functional scheme assessment. And that right there is not indicating that, you know, your kid's 17, but they're functioning like a, you know, 2-year-old. So that's why I like this assessment too, because it provides and allows dignity for the families and the students, but it also can bring about those skills that maybe have been missed for years because somebody didn't know about this particular assessment or this particular method. Again, I'm not, I'm not going to say that people are not working with the kids like maliciously. If you don't know, again, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that what to ask for. You don't know that it even exists. So, yes, that is extremely appropriate. Let's see, any other? Oh, good. I'm glad you like the Active Learning Space website. It's a very good resource. And of course, Texas Go for the Blind and Visually Impaired is on the list of resources as well. They have a lot of good training as well about using this. They actually form like cohorts and groups to use this assessment with their own students, and they report back and they have webinars about it and stuff. So there's a lot of training out there, a lot more in-depth training. I mean, this could be a whole class, a whole semester. There's so much involved in this. So I'm glad you like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you guys for
Yeah, thanks.
afternoon with us.
Yeah, thanks everybody.